You're listening to the How to Talk to Girls podcast, where you'll learn step-by-step how to meet and seduce beautiful women, whether you're looking for one night of fun, a week-long fling, or a long-term relationship. I'm your host, Trip, and the episode starts now. Hello and welcome to the How to Talk to Girls podcast. I'm your host, Trip Kramer from tripadvice.com. On today's episode, I have interviewed a friend and also a female and also a psychotherapist. What a perfect person to have as an interview for today's topic, where we're talking about the female's perspective on getting married. Why did I do this episode? Well, I talk a lot about, of course, how to talk to girls, because that's what this podcast is, and how to find a great woman and how to have an active dating life. And then I also talk about relationships, but I don't always touch upon marriage. I've done a few episodes on the concept. I've even done an episode in the past few months about divorce, but I haven't really talked about marriage. So I have someone today, Diana Mandel, to help us give the female perspective, but also she's a psychotherapist and she's a dating coach for men and women. So she is going to be really great at explaining and helping us understand why women want to get married and why some women don't want to get married. And she is married. And it's interesting, you're going to hear this in the interviews, that she actually didn't think about getting married, didn't want to get married. Most women do think about that. If you find a woman that you are friends with, you can ask them. Most are interested in marriage and are for a long time. But Diana wasn't until she ended up getting married. So it took her a long time to actually get interested in marriage until she found the guy that she was actually interested in, which I thought was very interesting. So we're going to be diving into that and talking about what marriage really means to a woman. And I think you need to know this stuff, because if you're interested in getting married, then this might be helpful and good information for you. Either way, I just want to be very clear here. This podcast is neither pro-marriage or against marriage. I'm not really telling you, hey, you got to get married. It's up to you. Some guys want to, some guys don't, some guys have to. Whatever your situation is, it's up to you. But at least you can get a nice perspective on how a female in America thinks about it. So we're going to be diving into that. Now, if you're someone who's looking for marriage and you want someone to settle down with and you want a great wife and not just anyone, so you can prevent her cheating on you or prevent getting a divorce or prevent a really nasty relationship. Of course, it's never guaranteed, but to the best of your abilities, find someone who you know is going to be the best fit for you. All you have to do is sign up for one-on-one coaching with me. Going to coachedbytrip.com is the URL to go to fill out an application for us to work together and find that special girl for you. So if you're looking for a woman to settle down with, but you don't want to settle with just anybody, then let me help you, let me guide you, let me get you to the point where you know exactly what to say to women to get them interested, to have that active dating life, and then to sift through and find the best quality woman for you. So I teach you everything to get to that point. Go to coachedbytrip.com today and apply for coaching. And if I see your application is a good fit, we're going to get on the phone and we're going to discuss how coaching works and get you all signed up. So check it out, coachedbytrip.com. Also, I see here that people have been leaving iTunes reviews, and I really appreciate that. So thank you to the people who have been doing that. Someone a few days ago said, great podcast, definitely has a lot of golden nuggets to boost confidence, be playful, and having fun while approaching women. Great job, Trip, 5 stars. I also got an interesting one from this person, I guess is a female, because the subject line is, I'm a girl and I don't like how this podcast is. I don't think they're from America. Because it says, I may be a girl, but this is discussing. I think she meant disgusting. This is discussing. I rather listen to people talk about nothing but smiling or something. I would give this a 0 star, but I can't, so 1 star then. Well, I guess she wasn't a big fan. Okay. Either way, whether you think it's a 1 star or a 5 star, please leave me a review. I like to read the reviews. I like to know what you think about it. And of course, more 5-star reviews do get the podcast out to more people and help more guys. So it doesn't just help me, helps your fellow man. Why don't we now get into the interview with Diana? She's got some great stuff to say about marriage. Here it is. Diana, it's so great to have you back for a 3rd time on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I think that, there are very few people who I interview even more than once, and I can only imagine even more than twice. So you are in a very special club. And as you can tell, because I'm having you back, I do appreciate your opinion. And I think that you have really interesting and great things to say on so many topics and dating, relationships, and now marriage. So it's great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason why I wanted you to talk about this topic on this episode was because first, you're female, so you're going to be able to give your female opinion. But second, because you do work in the dating and relationship space. And I just don't believe that people who aren't in this space are really able or good at being able to describe what's going on in terms of how men and women are thinking. Because, of course, they don't think about that and they're not studying that stuff like we are. So it's kind of like a double whammy here with you being able to give some good information. And I haven't really talked too much about marriage in depth on the podcast. So I wanted to kind of go into that today. So let's just start off with this. First of all, you are married, right?
Yes.
You've been married for what, 2 years now?
Almost. In June, it'll be 2 years.
Okay. I was very close there.
Yes.
And I'm curious about this. Now, you work with both men and women, correct?
Yes.
Out of all of your, let's just go total. Out of all the men and women you work with, do they all want to get married?
Some do and some don't. I find in the last few years it's shifted a little bit, where sometimes people are more about being in some sort of monogamous type of relationship, but it doesn't necessarily need to be so much about the label. Especially some of my clients who have been once or twice divorced, I think even feel less so the need to do that. So I think it really depends. I think there's still a lot of traditional people and people who want to get married, and that's the ultimate goal. But I'm seeing some shift a little bit more so than I ever have in that not necessarily being such a divine thing and having it be much more about the quality of the person and finding someone who's really great for them.
So you think maybe compared to years ago, it was more about getting married. And today you think maybe it's a little bit more about, well, yes, I want to get married, but I'm not just going to marry anyone. I want to find someone who's a right fit. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think a lot of things are different in the sense of, women who are working more. I feel like some people want to have kids, some people don't. I think even, 15, 20 years ago, even maybe a little bit less, if you didn't, date and get engaged and get married and have, 2.5 kids and have the picket fence and, have the kind of traditional quote unquote, like I made it type of, situation, anything different than that, it's like, well, what happened to you? What's wrong with you? Why is this your choice? Now I feel like we're a lot more open from really every angle, which is really nice, from, sexuality to the dynamics of our relationships to having children versus not. Things are really changing. So I think it gives people almost like the invitation to not necessarily do it in sort of the traditional way, which isn't always what's best for everyone.
Right. I agree. And I don't think that anyone should get married. It should just be a thing that you want to do if you want to do it, you know?
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about women now. So
Mhm.
you're the people who you surround yourself with, friends, family, clients, all these women. How many of them want to get married?
I mean, most of them are married. I would say probably of my, decently close group of girlfriends, I would say probably 90 to 95% are married, though I am almost 35. So it'd be different. We'd have a different conversation if I was 25. And now, so more of the communication, like the conversation is about, balancing the relationship of husband, possibly working, if my friends are, possibly having children. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like on to the next, type of thing. I was actually one of the latest people in my friend group to get married.
But are there any women out there that you know that are like, nope, not for me, like not interested? Doesn't matter if I find the right person. I'm just curious. I mean, I know this is not like really hardcore statistic data here, but I'm just curious if that exists in your world.
One friend of mine is kind of impartial about it to some degree. Every one of my other friends wanted to, though a girlfriend of mine, she is married. She's married about 3 years or so. She didn't necessarily want to. And it was funny on her first date with her now husband, who we went to high school with. he said, like, we're going to get married. And she's like, I'm not getting married. And he's like, okay, I'll change your mind. Don't worry about that. And she's like, I'm not getting married. He's like, okay, like they're just going back and forth and they're married now. So I think it sort of also depends on the person more so than the decision. I myself actually wasn't necessarily sort of thrilled with the idea of getting married, and which is kind of funny since I know what I do for
Why
a
is
living.
that?
Yeah. So I definitely am like a hopeless romantic and I sell love and I believe in it more than most. But I think for me, I wanted to be monogamous with one person, but I didn't necessarily know that I could love someone enough to want to be with them, long term. I didn't know if I don't know. I think in some ways it can kind of feel like something I should do. I think sometimes it feels like it's more of almost like a business slash like legal thing, where it sort of makes more sense too. I did want to have children. And so I think, that to me felt like that's why I want to have a marriage. But is that really a reason to have a marriage? Because it just kind of feels like the right thing to do if I'm going to have kids, or the responsible thing to do. You know what I'm saying? So there was a lot of back and forth on my side. And when I met my husband, obviously, it took some time. It wasn't right away necessarily, but I kind of loosened up on that a bit. And to me, it was about him, where it's like, oh, I could do this with you forever. You know what I mean? Like, you are my best friend. I could see myself doing that. And on my wedding day, I was the calmest I've probably ever been, to the point where, the people who worked there, the bridal attendant, my friends, I mean, really everyone who sort of was a touch point that day, and I didn't even sort of realize that would be the case, said that to me. Like, I've never seen anyone more calm. It's just sort of like, it's almost like shocking, but it was just, and it's not always in character of me, but it was like, it was the right decision. You know what I mean? I had nothing to worry about. It really was just the right thing. And I was excited. So I think it's more so, to me, to kind of land the plane on this, it's more about, in my opinion, someone possibly changing your mind. It's very easy to say one thing, but then when you meet someone, your entire perspective and idea on things could possibly change.
So what exactly changed for you? Like, what was some of the more specific points? Like, because at one point you said you didn't care or to get married, or you didn't and your mind was changed, or you're just like, ah, whatever happens, happens.
It was more, I would say negative than positive. I just felt like it was something that I was expected to, which I don't like. I'm not really sort of big into authority, which is probably why I have my own business. I don't really love being told what to do. So I think the fact that it was expected of me and kind of like, well, what's wrong with you? If I didn't, I kind of like to go against the grain. Usually when people tell me go right, I'll go left. So, and not even like an obnoxious way, and more of like an exploratory type of way. So I think for me, it was, just not having seen the evidence, let's say, of being with anyone, wanting to truly spend every single day with someone. And forever is a long time, hopefully, for everyone. And so the idea of being with someone forever, it just felt, which is sort of like masculine in a way, but I felt like I would just be very trapped. I felt like, I couldn't get out of it. What if, it's a lot of what ifs, like what if someone goes crazy, or, what if, not even necessarily from a cheating perspective, but just like I can't control everything, right? And I'm a control freak. I can control myself, but I can't control someone else. And the idea of putting that much trust in someone else kind of terrified me. And I didn't have the, again, like sort of evidence at that point up until meeting him that anyone was sort of, I wouldn't even necessarily say worthy enough, but just for me, was sort of like the right fit. Does that make sense?
So he was the right fit, but how did that, it kind of makes sense.
Mhm.
But then how did that all change? All of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a minute. No, I do want to get married. Where was that click for you? I'm curious.
So this was actually an interesting conversation. So my mom had seen me in, some failed relationships before I really started kind of coaching myself and going through my own program. So my mom and I had a sit down at one point, just very random. It wasn't, structured, let's say, the conversation. And we were talking about him. And I'm not even sure if he was my boyfriend yet. I mean, obviously it was, there was some sort of foundation there. So I'm assuming probably he was my boyfriend. And she was like, what's going on with you guys? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I really like him. I don't know. And it was kind of that type of conversation. And she really like laid it down thick. And she's like, I've seen you with a lot of people and I've seen you, not being treated the way that you should. And I see this guy and he's wonderful and it's consistent and you've changed. Like I see differences in you. I was also working on myself, but she's like, I see that things are different. And all of my friends were sort of matching with the same experience where they're saying like, you're different when you're around him than any guy I've ever seen you with. And it was just very easy to be around him. And I was always myself. I was never kind of priming myself or feeling like, oh, I have to have, all my makeup done and my hair done and almost like pre-plan things out. It was just super comfortable from our first date. And even our first date was not about sort of like the, interview style questions. It wasn't like, oh, let me show, the best version of myself. Like it was really honest and raw and real. It was over 3 hours. Like we both opened up to each other. It's kind of what a lot of people in the dating world say not to do, where we're like, we were there, over a certain amount of time. We had dinner, we went against a lot of what people say. And we really, again, like opened up, like it was very real conversation. And he's a little bit older than me. He challenges me. He is just very calm. Like he just brings out the best in me. He makes up for what I lack. It's just super easy and it never stopped. And I think my concern was seeing all this good stuff and sort of feeling like maybe it could go away. And I think between my mom's sort of moment of like, at this point, like it's your fault if you don't pursue this, right? It's like, I see you happy. I see this great guy. He treats you really well. And, unfortunately, my father had passed away and he was like my absolute favorite person. And that's probably to some degree why I didn't want to get married either, because it's obviously a really painful day to not have your father. But my mom said to me, like, he's reminds me of dad. And it was like very intense. And it was, it like hit me to the core. I didn't really expect her to say that. And that is like, to me, the utmost compliment that someone can give. So I think between that conversation, which was like a bit of a smack in the face, both between it being as deep as it was relating to my father, but also saying, just like at this point, like you've dated so many like crappy guys. This is such a good guy. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like get your, stuff together. And it was that moment. And it was another moment. I'll make it sort of quicker, but he was always very, very nice. And I wasn't sure if it was real or if it was just sort of manufactured. And he was just trying to be, nice around me to kind of, quote unquote, impress me, which is a very bad idea and something I teach, all the men that I work with to not do, to be like very agreeable and, obviously be a nice guy, sure. But to just be like overly nice is not good. So I wasn't sure if it was kind of real or not. And at one point I was in his apartment and we were having a snowstorm and both of our cars, were on sort of like outside parking, let's say. So he goes out and he was gone for a while. And I couldn't call him because he didn't bring his phone because you wouldn't hear it. So he comes back and I was like, wow, you're gone a while. Is everything okay? He did my car, his car, and there was a girl who was trying to get her, car brushed off and wasn't doing a great job. And he helped her as well. And it was like, wow, like this is a really good guy. I need to just kind of like admit to myself, this is a really good guy. You know what I mean? Like it's...
So why marriage though? Why not just keep dating or being a couple? Why marriage? Why, you know what I'm saying? Like why go through like I understand now you make a good case on this is a great guy for you. Sounds like an amazing match. You found an amazing partner, all good things. Then why the next step to marriage?
I think,
Besides just like hanging, I say hanging out. Okay, that's a little too casual. I mean, just living together or, doing all the things that two married people might do without necessarily the legal stuff and the ceremony.
Sure. So I think it's a couple different things. I think for one, it was important to my husband. He really did want to get married. I wasn't like dead set against it, obviously. It was just kind of one of those like, I don't know, like I'm not really sure if it's for me. So I think it might have been a different conversation if I had said no. I probably would have been much more honest up front, you know what I mean? Within a few dates, probably. I would have said that, getting married is just sort of not necessarily for me. So I don't know that I felt, that strongly. It was more just like, nah, I'd kind of need the evidence in a sense to make me want to have that commitment. And I'm not one to get divorced. I don't think anyone goes into marriage with that, but that's like not really an option for me. it just seems like a really big headache and, not not interested in that. So for me, it would be a lifelong thing. And most things that I've done in my life, I could get out of. That's something you can't get out of. So I think it was sort of the permanence. But I think being with him, I just sort of had no doubt I wanted to be with him for the rest of my life. I do want to have children, and to have children again, I thought, being married just kind of makes everything easier. I like the idea of sort of this safety of being in a committed relationship with them and really having to work at things. And not that we didn't beforehand, but it is different with marriage. The day after I got married, it wasn't as if like, oh my God, everything's so different. This is weird. I mean, nothing changed. We already lived together. I just had a more bling on my finger, but it was more, it is different. Like it does shift where it's like, wow, like we really need to work in this. And not that we really were like this, but you can't just sort of like walk out. You know what I mean? Like I felt even more sort of like a sense of responsibility to really work on myself, to be the best version of myself, to really make this work, to build a home. Hopefully we'll have kids, we have a dog. Like I realize that it is what I want, but I don't have to necessarily do it in the traditional sense. I don't necessarily need to kind of color in the lines all the time where we get to sort of define what our dynamics look like and what our relationship looks like and kind of do things in our own time. I think everyone in general kind of rushes everyone to the point where I called people when we were engaged and like, when are you getting married? I'm like, I got engaged 5 minutes ago. I don't even know what you're talking about. I think everyone is sort of so rushed and, at our wedding, literally at our wedding, people are like, when's the baby? Like, are you going to try on your honeymoon? And it was like, what is wrong with people? So I think, we all feel very sort of like rushed and people are just kind of like waiting for the next thing, for you guys to do because they're sort of like bored of like the thing that you're currently doing. And it puts a lot of pressure. So I think it's a case of, it's not for everyone. And I think that's okay. And I think we need to not be so sort of judgy of people's, decisions to do or not do certain things. So I think for me, it just felt like the safety of it all, I think too. And I think I felt very, like I had sort of an issue with that because I don't necessarily, want a man to make me feel safe. I want to make myself feel that way. But I realized that that's okay to kind of be vulnerable and allow someone else to make me feel that way as well, not for me, but to also, sort of have that perspective. So I think it's kind of a combination of things, that he wanted to, that I felt like I don't want to be with anyone else. I want to have kids, and I think it makes it less complicated in that sense. I like the safety. I like the idea of, we sort of can't get out of this in a way, easily, I guess you could say. And I haven't regretted it, for 5 minutes. But again, I know that it isn't necessarily for everyone, even if you find an amazing person to end up with. You know what I mean? Like no one can tell
Yeah.
you exactly what makes sense for you and what doesn't. But I think, in the dating relationship space, one thing I find is it's much more about finding someone. It's not really about keeping them. So people don't really know how to have healthy relationships. So I think a lot of people see their parents, having bad relationships and even themselves having bad relationships. And it's really tough to think of being in a relationship that's, proactive and healthy and consistent and, what it should be. I think most people don't even know what it should be. So how do they achieve that?
Right. Right. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And everything you're saying here is interesting too, because I do hear a lot of these similar things. The idea of, you get married, so you make it a little bit more permanent. Of course, you can always get divorced, but it's a very big process to get divorced. So it forces you to work on the thing. So that's interesting. That is, I don't think everyone looks at it that way. I think most people just do it for love. But it's interesting how you're saying that you were conscious of that fact of thinking, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to go into something like this that I know is challenging, that because it is a little bit more permanent. So because it's more permanent, it's harder to get out of, and therefore forcing you to say, okay, I'm not going to give up so easily.
Exactly. I think a lot of couples do, where when something becomes difficult, and listen, we all deal with difficulties, whether it's, personally on our own, accord or whether it's, within the relationship. And you don't necessarily kind of have the ability to, or the wherewithal or the energy, let's say, to, sit down, have a conversation, deal with it, however that needs to happen. And so people are, again, I feel like have often one foot in and one foot out. And whether that's fear based or self sabotage or, whatever that may be, in this case, there is again, like a sense of safety in it. And like, of course, I did it for love because I love him. And like I said, every day with him is pretty easy. You know what I mean? Like we don't have fights. We communicate really well, but obviously some of that relates to, what I do for a living where I've sort of, implemented that into our relationship pretty much, from the beginning where we're very proactive and not reactive in situations. And that's the issue when I have couples come in. It's generally to the point where they hate each other and they want me to kind of, come in and kind of wave a magic wand and have,
Oh
them
god,
both
they
love each
hate
other.
each other. That just makes me cringe. It's just like,
Yeah.
you have this wedding day and everyone's in love and it's just so nice, and then it's like I imagine going to a wedding. I've been to many weddings as a guest, and I sit there and I'm not trying to be negative. I just try, like, it's just kind of interesting. I find in my head, I go, one day these people are either going to get divorced and it's going to be so nasty, or they're going to be, potentially in couples therapy saying what you just said. I'm not saying that that is the end result for all marriages, but I was just like, sometimes I sit there and I just think, like, because they're saying all this I love you stuff, that, it's not going to always necessarily be like that because relationships are tough. So it's interesting to hear you say that they just come in, they're just like hating each other. And hey, I mean, a lot of marriages do end in divorce, about half, 60%, at least, from what we know in America. But yeah, again, I don't think this podcast is necessarily even about pro marriage or against marriage. It's more just understanding what it's all about, what it means to the woman, And so I think we got a good idea. What do you think in terms of how, because you think very rational, you analyze things, but you may have some friends that don't think on that level. What do you think for the people who aren't, relationship coaches and analyzing this stuff? Why do you think they want to get married?
I think it depends on whether we're talking about, men or women to some degree. That can shift a little bit because
Women,
I do. Okay,
women
so for women,
specifically.
sure. I think some of it is the sort of expectation to get married that, if you're, 35 or 40 and single, it's like, what's wrong with you? What happened? Whereas with men, it's a little less so because it could be, he's trying to develop himself or, he's been trying to, make money and really focus on business. But, with a woman, it's like they're almost like damaged goods. And I even find some of my clients occasionally, will sort of say that where it's like, she's 35, like, what the hell's wrong with her? And I don't know that's necessarily fair, but I think, women feel that sense of urgency and they feel that if they want to have a child, which not everyone does, but a lot of women do, that they want to, be in a relationship. There's a very small window in which, we really are fertile. And even though it's sort of stretched a bit, it generally is like up to about 40. So, if you want to have multiple children, you start doing the math, it is difficult, and unfortunately some women, will feel that pressure and end up, choosing the wrong person or thinking that they're marrying one thing, but they just didn't leave enough time to sort of understand the person, let's say. And so they just kind of rush into it. But I think for a lot of women, it's wanting sort of like that perfect quote unquote situation, where you have someone who loves you and you have children and it still is that sort of very traditional thing for, us to do. And I think, we feel that pressure even more so because back in the day, it was like, that's what women did. Like they got married and had babies and that was about it. Now at least, there's more going on with women where, if we want to be in business, we are and be like real career women. But it's very difficult as women to kind of balance and have it all. But a lot of it, again, relates to, that sort of pressure and that feeling almost like the ultimate goal. You know what I mean? It's like have the man, have the babies, have the house, possibly have the career, depending on who we're talking about. So it kind of feels like that. There were a lot of girls, even that I grew up with in high school, that were like, I want to get married, have kids. You know what I mean? Like, and I was thinking about my business and having a career. I wasn't sort of thinking or talking about that. I wasn't that sort of boy crazy girl. So I think everyone, is a bit different and probably to some degree it relates to what they grew up in, in their parents' situation. For some women, I see they were like petrified of marriage because they saw their parents' marriage was not that great. You know what I'm saying? So I think it really depends on sort of the view that you have of marriage going into, your 20s and 30s when most people are getting married. So I think it is kind of pressure filled. If you're the only one of your friends that aren't married, it feels a bit strange, no? Like everyone's probably talking behind your back, that. your family, is stressed out, kind of wondering what's wrong with you also. My husband got married a little bit later, and there were a lot of, conversations that were happening where people were like, like, kind of, what's wrong with this guy? And there wasn't anything wrong with him. So, I mean, that's just a perfect example, and he's even a guy, and people were thinking that. So I think we're a very sort of judgy, type of sort of society, yet we look more so as like, you should get married, as opposed to people actually having a really good marriage and being really happy. Because when you look sort of under the hood, most relationships I see, I hate to say it, but could either drastically, improve, or could at least somewhat improve. And people are not spending like the time, the energy, and the real focus to be able to do that. They're just sort of tired at the end of the day after work and don't want to do anything after that. They come home, they want to eat and watch Netflix and just kind of veg out and turn their brain off. And while, you and I, we work hard, we can understand that. That's not the way that this works. You know what I mean? A relationship that's good doesn't just sort of stay, a good relationship just because you're marrying someone, who's great. It's work. And a lot of people just can't do
Yeah.
that. So that's, one of the issues of marriage.
Yeah. No, it's interesting too, just piggybacking off what you're saying there. I heard from Esther Perel, who's a very popular sociologist in terms of sex and marriage and desire and attraction and things like that.
Yeah, she's
She
great.
said that, one of the reasons why relationships or marriages the desire tends to drift off is because you go to work and you're your best person. You're the most confident, you're the best, like you're giving it your all at your job. And you're actually most times your most attractive self when you're doing your work, because again, you're in your element. And then you come home and not only you not in your element anymore, but you're drained. So you show your partner almost like the worst side of yourself, because you come home and you just are tired, your brain is dead. You just, like you said, want to make some food because you're hungry and you want to watch some TV and then go to bed. So your partner on a consistent basis is getting the worst part of you. So no wonder desire dies in a relationship. And it's interesting because a lot of people, even myself, might think, wait a minute. So you got to go to work and like work really hard. And then you got to go home and then you got to work on your relationship. And it's like, that's a lot. And the answer is, yeah, that is a lot. Unfortunately, hard work is what needs to be put in to have a very successful life. So if you want a successful relationship, I don't think that you every single night have to come home and be the most amazing person ever. But if you're never doing that and you're not working at all at it and you're just treating it as something that's, it's going to be there, we're married and we live together and she's not leaving me or he's not leaving me, eventually it will come to the point where you're in front of a therapist in couples therapy saying, we hate each other, right? Like we were saying before. So yeah, it does take work. That's just the name of the game. Diana, this was great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here. And, because you are someone who is married and not just someone who's just talking about it, I feel like it speaks more to understanding a little bit more perspective of women. But you are not just a person who's married, you're also a dating and relationship coach. And if guys want to work with you, can you tell us, what do you work with guys on? Where can they find you if they do want to work with you?
Sure. So I work with single men and also men in relationships. We work on confidence, approaching women, understanding women. I kind of do like a two-pronged type of thing where on the first we talk about sort of inner stuff, like confidence and self-sabotage and repeated patterns, things like that. And on the other hand, we talk more practical side, which again is like approaching, where to meet high quality women, intimacy, sex, having a healthy relationship, what that looks like, things like that. And you can find more info on me and how to work with me at dianamandel.com.
And that information will be in the show notes for you, the listener, to check out if you want to speak more with Diana. Diana, thank you so much. You are now third time on the podcast, and I just have a gut feeling it won't be the last. So thank you so much for being here once again.
Thank you for having me.